All right, so the last part of our afternoon is just an open town hall here with our fellow city council members. To my right, I'm Jonathan Nicola again. To my right is Randy Bushcutter, Mayor Stan Klaus, Bob Lammers, and Bruce Lear. And really, this is your chance to, we're not going to do the audio visual technology. This is just microphone in hand, stand up and ask questions of us, raise issues that are on your mind, particularly as they relate to the future of our city. So we'll do our best to answer questions, and we're just going to go right into those. So we have two microphones, one on either side of the auditorium. And so just give those folks a second to come over to you before you start your question. And also, again, I know you might have something on your mind. It's okay to, kind of say what you got to say, but, please try your best to keep it brief so that we can have as many people ask questions and answer them as possible. So we'll go ahead and get started.
I know you guys get talked to all the time from all kinds of people. What kind of good ideas? I mean, we've heard a lot about the shortage of housing and the cost of development. What kind of good ideas have you heard in the last couple of years that Kearney could be pursuing in the future?
Well, long term, we hear all sorts of things. The Economic Development Board, for instance, ideas about what we need to do for, say, the tech park. I mean, that's the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is the ongoing discussion we have in terms of dealing with that and trying to modernize our economy. I mean, we have some stable things that we're never really going to lose. I don't think we're ever going to lose UNK, and that's been a very important element economically for us. I think there's a backbone that we really have worked hard to develop in terms of our manufacturing. That I think is going to stay. But we have those ongoing conversations with how do you keep that? Because there were some concerns that the Buffalo might go if they, with their expansion, might go to Kansas City. There's just all sorts of examples. The first thing that comes to my mind are the things that come up with economic development and with that. I think the discussion we had with the restaurant tax and building youth parks and things like that is another good example. Splash grounds, another good idea that we've kind of come up with. Once we put in one, we heard from so many people just how valuable those were. So I think there's a lot of examples of that, and some of that comes up from a conversation that you have when you're buying fruit at the grocery store. Somebody come up and say, why don't you guys do whatever? I find that to be extremely valuable. One of the ideas I heard recently, we're checking into what the cost would be, is somebody pointed out to me that the new skate park, people are skating on there all the time when it's dark and they have the lights on the basketball court. But the lights aren't on the skate park, they're actually on the basketball court. Why don't we put some lights on that? And I think there's some poles and things like that, so we're kind of looking at that. That's just a recent example that I have, and I'm sure everybody else has some other good examples too.
Yeah, one of the things, and Suzanne and I were talking about that a little bit too, it has to do, obviously, in the field I'm in, is with some energy things. And, we're working on a Tesla charging station for the Tesla vehicles up and down the interstate. Earlier this week, we were in meetings in Lincoln and talking about the electrical vehicle charging stations, the up and down the interstate. We've looked at that several years ago, and it just wasn't something that we really felt we should get engaged in. But now we're starting to see some of those things pick up. So when you look at new and emerging technologies, another area that we're looking at that really not a lot of people look at, we're still in the infant stages, is looking at a solar farm and trying to do something with a solar array. And the effects of that will be that as we recruit technology and as we are looking at technology-based businesses, green energy, the credits, having a solar area in our community will set us apart from other communities our size. And so we're in the process of negotiating on that, working through, obviously with MPPD, what does that look like? There's a lot of pieces that are moving to that. But as I've told some of our colleagues on state, if there's one community that can pull it off, it's going to be Kearney, because we'll figure out a way to get it done, and then that'll help us longer term. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but that's something that's on the horizon, and I feel strongly we'll get there. There might be some pain along the way. We'll have to figure those things out.
I think if you look at
within about the last 2 years, we took a tour of the career development facility over in Grand Island, and you already are seeing the Scott Morris facility that's going into Kearney High, the community college going in and going to stress career training. Those are some of the things that came about by us really investigating into some of those things and really encouraging the business community and the schools to pick up on. And Kearney High took that to heart and saw what the business people were asking for and went with that. With the tech park, that's a great place to expand our job base from the standpoint we have the University of Nebraska at Kearney here that's training a lot of those people. A lot of when we were looking at the facility we were looking at with Facebook, that was a deal that brings in high-paying jobs, but not lots of jobs, but it creates a huge source for using up energy, and that energy creates capital that comes into our community. Tremendous opportunity for us there. So those are just a couple of things that really strike me as what we're trying to do.
Great being fit. Okay, well, you're last then. So. I actually took your question, Matt. Did you mean anything about low-income housing, for example, or, not that I'm not duplicating everything I've already talked about. One of the issues that we've had, because we've already had so much development, we've always had so much growth, is how do we better accommodate providing places for our workforce to be and so forth. And one of the real issues we have in our community is the cost of housing. And that's where I've seen some things really start to get bubbled about here lately, whether it's the use of TIF financing or other things that help bring the cost of residential development down. I think that's something you're going to see the council working pretty hard on. That said, I think on any issue you could have about any idea and you could forward it on to us because we maybe haven't thought about it before. It's particularly when you're trying to get an affordable housing base built a little more quickly than what we've been able to get one built in our community. There aren't any easy, obvious solutions. So that's where we found things. We've talked about using things like TIF to try and help make something like that happen.
Well, first of all, I don't know why I was the only one when Darren mentioned chickens that wanted to give him a standing ovation, but I was the only one apparently that wanted to do that. That was like there was a first meeting that I was on the city council and that was the topic, and I just happened to be on the other side of that one. It's a backyard organic garden myself, but that's beside the point. An issue that I think that was weird, the city was a good idea that we adopted, had to do with body cameras for the police department. I think that the police department quickly adopts the use of technology, and that's something that we did several months before. Now it's becoming the thing for police departments to include that. And just in talking to the police department, they've already put it to good use. And I think we have a good relationship in Kearney between our police department and its residents. And you often hear about the use of that technology in larger urban areas where there's a more tense relationship between some citizens and law enforcement. But here, even where we have a good relationship by and large, it's a good use of technology is going to make everyone safer and help everyone do their job more effectively. So I thought that was a good example of an idea that we put to use quickly.
In 2011, Planned Parenthood of the Heartland announced its intention to open 6 new facilities in Nebraska, including Kearney. Is there anything the city of Kearney and the city council can do to keep Kearney abortion-free?
We're all passing the mic on something. Hot take. Yeah. Marilyn, I would just say that it's our job to set building codes that are uniform, that no matter who is looking, as long as who is looking to use it can fill. I got to think about this one, right? No matter who wants to use a building, as long as it fits within the code that's been set, in this case, a health facility. I don't know personally if someone who is pro-life. I'm not sure this person in the city should have the business of deciding who can and can't fill certain facilities. I think that's more, the abortion issue, I feel, is more of a state and federal issue. And our job in the city is to create basic rules that the business community can follow when they're trying to find tenants and not having to wonder, is this one going to be muster or not? So I know it's a very sensitive issue, but that's just my personal belief about it.
I don't want to look like I'm passing this one up either. Pro-life as well, fairly devout Catholic, and you know how the church feels about that issue as well. But we all took an oath to uphold both the U.S. and the Nebraska state constitution, and part of that is exactly the things that Jonathan's talking about, and that is to uphold the law as it is. An issue to change the law could be something that would be done at the state or the federal level. The city doesn't have a right to do that. And frankly, don't really want to live in a system where the government can decide what businesses that are legal can and cannot come into our community. And that would be part of the difficulty with that as well.
And I'll take one step further. It's not just that, but there are a lot of moral and ethical type issues that you're confronted with, whether it's alcohol, whether it's that type of issue. And as I look and think about those things, I like to do a little bit of research to find out what you can do, because certainly our role is a fiscal responsibility of the city. So we can't take some action that we know we're going to get into lawsuits and we're going to lose. And then I think what happens is each one of us individually has to decide what our position is going to be on that. And then it comes down to a vote. But first and foremost, my line of thinking is, what can we do within the parameters of the law? If I don't want this in my community, what can I do that will keep our community out of a lawsuit that we would lose, but yet still achieve what I think our community wants or doesn't want? And I think we've taken that position on a lot of issues. And some of it's controversial, and I would say dismiss charities is another one, and everybody's familiar with that. That was an issue of whether you believe it, whether it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. The reality is, we had to make sure that we didn't take any action that could legally cost us some dollars that are better spent on things that are more positive in our community. So that would be my first response. Let's take a look at it, and then we each have to individually assess what our position is and what we stand for.
Stands right on that. That's a main thing we look at, and I compare it really to that dismiss charities thing. It's maybe not something that we would want to bring to the community if we were out trying to actively go out and prospect for some business to come to our community. But we have to look at what we can legally do and not. Every place that they have tried to come into, anybody that's tried to block them has been enforced a lawsuit, has lost that lawsuit. So that's the reason we have to look at those things.
Yeah, I can't add much other than early on, probably the first issue I got to see that involved issues that approached that, not of that significance, of course, was the I Believe in Me ranch, when we were going through the whole zoning and whether or not to give them a conditional use permit. And what I came by at that time is, as a city, we get to regulate where things go. We get to set out areas of town where a specific type of business can take place. We don't get to regulate what goes on within that business, whether it's a hospital or a gas station or an abortion clinic. That's just not within our purview, unfortunately.
Easier question to answer.
Will you stick with your answers regarding strip clubs and juice bars?
I can't speak for Councilman Lear. I think everything, you still have to follow that mindset. What can you do and what can't you do, and what do they legally have the right to do. The thing that we can always take a look at is what is, if they, and the council's been pretty consistent on this, is if it requires a zoning change, then that's different. But if they look at an area that's already zoned and already permissible, then that's a whole different situation. And you being on the planning commission, you see some of those things too, Jack. That there are some things that, right or wrong, sometimes they have the right to put some of these things in there because that's how it's zoned, that's how the code allows it. And you're really jeopardizing and facing some other unintended consequences if you try to change and do something different. And public sentiment might be behind you that you could lose.
It's pretty cold out today, and within the next year or so, the high school is going to be vacated, and there's a lot of recreational facilities there that maybe the city or university or the school system could combine, because we've been big on partnerships for a long time in this community. I know it's an older building, but I think there'd be a lot of things that would be useful there. Maybe the Horizon's going to use some of it, but I would think that we've been short on indoor facilities for quite a while. But I'm sure maybe folks have talked about it before, but I think it would be something that would be good for the community.
Yeah, we have talked about that, and John Watts was getting ready, and Alex, they were getting ready to raise their hand and tell us that we'd buy it from something different. We will certainly talk about that, because, you know, we have needs in the park and rec department, but I think, you know, my personal opinion, that building, we're building a new school for a reason. And the reason was another facility had bad HVACs, there were a lot of things wrong with that building. So to repurpose it and say, okay, the building's fine now, we can use it for this, I think you gotta be careful on that, because then what's happened, you've sold the voters a bill of goods. So I think there are pieces of it, we'll just have to assess it. And certainly there's some things out of that building that I think we'll partner with, and we'll work with the school board. You know, they've got more money than we do, so maybe they'll just give it.
Well, for the whole facility, it's very hard to reconstruct, and that'll be the difficulty that the school board will have in trying to sell that facility, because it has limited uses for anybody else but for a school. Obviously, when the community college decided to build a new facility down by the new high school, that eliminated one of the best prospects. So that's very challenging. As far as utilizing the actual basketball arena and those things, some of those things are very useful, and there's probably some way that the city may look into trying to partner on some of that kind of stuff. But as far as from the whole facility, I don't think that the city is probably interested in that kind of thing.
I don't know that I could add a lot to that, Dick. That, you know, it is something that when you have a facility like that, if we can repurpose it and we find a good way to do that, in other words, the school board goes ahead and gives us all the property and then actually does some enhancements to it before they leave, that would be a great way for us to consider or open that conversation. In that line, I think we are short. Anybody who has been involved, particularly in youth sports over the years, and probably at the high school and collegiate levels, we do have a shortage of indoor space. I mean, we could certainly utilize some indoor space. So I'm kind of envious. I kind of drool a little bit when I see what Lexington's announced in terms of a field house facility over there, because we all know that we need more indoor soccer facilities in particular. Baseball and softball are nice, but we all know that soccer really is kind of the king. I'm joking. I hope Brad's here somewhere.
Your daughter plays what?
Yeah, I'll do all the full disclosure. I'm a soccer coach, so that's why I get on that. But we do have a shortage of facilities, and we do need to do something about it. It would be nice if there were a way to leverage those high school facilities for that. If there's a way, believe me, we will try and find it. But it doesn't seem the most likely scenario right now.
And somewhat related to that, a couple of things come to my mind is, for one, if you're using up that part of the footprint of what the school is, limits the rest of the uses that the school board would be able to use for the rest of the facility. So I don't know if it'll work or not. It'd be great to have that space, no question about it. We did try with the first original proposal for a restaurant tax, the idea of building a field house that would address those problems right there, and the voters gave a resounding no to that. So, I mean, the answer to virtually all of our problems is money, and how much do you want to spend, and then you're overtaxing and that sort of things. But I think the voters kind of spoke on that in terms of how much money they really want the city to throw to something like that.
Yeah, obviously, all five of us don't have to answer every question when we agree with each other, but the only thing, I do have one thing to add in this case, in that first of all, I do think it's an opportunity, because the Park and Recs Department has said that, you know, they have a ton of participation, they could definitely use the gym space, I don't think there's any doubt about it. My advice, unsolicited advice to the school board, who a couple are sitting here, would be, you know, I think it's fair to their voters, our voters, to let the marketplace sort of test it out first and see what kind of offers they get. See what creative ideas Kearney, developers, Kearney residents have for the piece of property before we get to the point of just going to the city. But if we get to that point, I think it could be something very, very possible and doable for us.
Bruce is not that good a soccer coach either. As we go back to affordable housing, you talked a little bit about TIF. One of the things I've heard from several developers and other people who've come across my desk is that the requirements placed upon them by the city of Kearney are way, way different than other communities that they may develop in. And I wonder, number one, you could talk a little bit about that, why you do what you do, and is there any opportunities for improvement to help drive down those development costs?
Would you say other communities, is it better or worse?
What's that?
It easier to work with it or worse?
Harder. It's harder here.
Okay. Well, wait.
Just after.
If you look what's going on at the legislature, there are 2 or 3 bills in the legislature right now that will potentially change how TIF is utilized across the state. And it could end up really being detrimental to developers. I think Kearney has used it well over the years. When you look at the cost benefit and the projects that have been built and now on the tax rolls, I think you've seen a lot of development through the use of TIF. And some of the issues that we see across the state are, well, the school boards or the county, they're not aware of what's going on and it impacts them. We do talk to them. They do know what's going on. And I think our community is a community that understands the but-for test. And we might have a couple situations where maybe people could question it, but by and large, there's a process in place and we follow the process. And there's state regulations that you will do this. There's oversight already in place. But I would tell you that what's in front of the legislature right now could totally change how we do it. It could significantly impact some of the developments and, in my opinion, slow down maybe some of the opportunities and things that we've done in our community. And, we look at other communities, how they've done it. Some of them have blatantly done it wrong. I get that. They didn't pay attention to what they were doing. But those are few and far between because most of the cities, as we talk to them, understand the process and they do go through it. There is oversight, and there is reporting, and there's a lot of steps you got to go through before you can just generate a TIF project. But we are seeing benefits, and my concern is that all that could change anyway.
I think the city of Kearney's done a pretty nice job of trying to be cooperative with developers and to work with them. If you look at the projects that Kearney's had that have used TIF, those are very nice projects that have been very well done. The city of Kearney is, Mike Morgan's staff have done a really good job of being solution-based. They try to be of service to the community and to find ways to do things, not ways to prevent things. And I think that's one of the things about Kearney that makes it great is that we try to find ways to make things happen. And we've been successful at doing that.
And I didn't know if maybe you meant your question, in addition to TIF, what other things are you trying to do to make it easier to build here is kind of how I took it. And, there's not a great easy answer to that. One of the things that we could do, for example, is instead of requiring cement paved streets, is we could go to asphalt, some of those kinds of things. And I would just say as a group, we've been really hesitant to want to let up on some of those kind of standards. One of the things that comes up in any of those discussions is, do we make the standards a little lower in order to get the cost of this housing down so that it's more affordable? And typically when we've talked about affordable housing, we've really focused in on something $150,000 to $175,000 range. There seems to be a gap for that in our community. And every time we talk about, as a city, how could we lessen our requirements, then the second part of that discussion is, okay, then what do we have 20, 30 years later? What is going to happen to that development? Not just create housing today, but how is it going to be a good, sustainable development? And we do get hung up there, because when you start talking about putting in asphalt streets, it's maybe cheaper to put it in today, but then it's more cost to maintain it later. And so sometimes what happens then, if it costs more money later and you're in a budget crunch at that point, then what happens? Your streets just don't get repaired as well as they should, and you can have a neighborhood that suffers as a result. So we've been a little challenged to want to relax our standards in terms of development. Now, basically on some of the things I've heard, what we really need to do is find a way, if you're trying to build a $150,000 to $175,000 house, you need that all-in lot cost to be, I don't know, $20,000, $25,000. You can't have it get to be too big a price of the house, or what happens is the builder has no margin in that house and therefore no incentive to build it. They can build a $250,000 house and make the same amount or make more money for the same amount of work as a $150,000 house. That's what we need to drive at. And we're going to continue to try and find creative things, but I don't think we have great answers yet, in part because we don't want to lower the standards at this point.
And I'm sorry if I misunderstood when you said TIF, that means because that's on our radar big time. Just like counties and bridges and schools and school formula, TIF is one thing that's really, and we've used it so well, and that's why I just caught a flag because we're getting hammered on it.
What unfunded mandates have the greatest impact on the city's budget or cause you the biggest grief? And secondly, what's the city's position on the county inheritance tax?
I guess I don't know that, we're always watching to see what the EPA regulations are going to do. Obviously, that's always key, but as I think about it, and Michael, you might want to correct us on this, but I'm thinking it's not so much the unfunded mandates, but as the funding sources are going away. Federal levels, roads, for example. We get surface transportation funds that we use for our streets, and so we've been negotiating, talking about where we at with those funds. And I think it's more, as I think about it, it's not so much the mandates, although we could be impacted on the environmental side and some of the building code things and some of those type of things in development. I think it's more the things that are going away and how do we replace some of that funding. Because the city of Kearney gets no state funding on municipal equalization tax. We get nothing. And that's because our property taxes are the lowest in the state and class 1 cities. So that's how I view that. Then as far as the inheritance tax with counties, I don't know that we necessarily have a position on it. And the reason I say that is because there are a lot of things that we go to the county for that maybe we hadn't planned on. And they've got to look at their road plans, and they've got to look at bridge repairs and all these things all around the county. But yet we have some impending needs in Kearney, and so sometimes they might get a windfall that they can help us do our projects around the city of Kearney easier, but that's their slush fund, if you will. It's not something they can count on all the time, but if it's there, it allows us to do some things and partner with the county to get some projects done. So I would say I am not going to take a position one way or the other on that with the county. I know it's a big deal, but I also know that the city of Kearney would benefit a lot from them having that fund.
One other thing in terms of maybe not an unfunded mandate, but the rules that the state has in terms of our budget making authority, in terms of what we can tax, what we can spend, that sort of thing. Kearney's been actually caught in a tough spot because we've been too responsible for too long with our money, and as bizarre as that sounds, what it's done is it's hamstringed our ability to actually grow and spend more revenue when it comes in. And as a result of that, we've had difficulty with some budgets in terms of being able to make it because of restraints that apply based on what you spent previously. Well, Kearney didn't spend much money previously. So if you start with a responsible budget and now you got to cut it 1%, you keep doing that. If there was no fat on the bone to begin with, now you're starting to hit some muscle that you really want to keep, if that makes sense. And that's been one of the other issues that we've kind of had. Not an unfunded mandate, but some state laws that have impacted us and kind of hurt us in terms of us being able to do some of the things we want to do.
Unfunded mandates that come to my mind, Stan referenced EPA, so anything with environmental issues, absolutely. We're having to make changes to our wastewater treatment facility for things for things we may not have in our water, but that's the mandate. We have to keep up with it. The other thing I'd say also, the federal government, we talk about housing. One component of housing are all the federal building regulations that might be the biggest problem that space builders when they're trying to build homes for people. And the other unfunded mandate I was going to mention was, if I just stammer long enough, I'll remember what. Oh, I know. Human resources issues, like anybody, like any business. You know, when healthcare laws change, when workers' compensation laws change, we have to keep up with that too. So those are some examples that come to my mind.
They're really not so much unfunded mandates, but some of the regulations from the federal government that come down to us, it's just like was stated here earlier. They get handed to us and they're maybe partially funded, but we have to deal with them. And those all come into effect and driving up the cost of everything that happens from a government standpoint, from the federal government, state government. As those regulations come in, the more regulations, the more cost, the more people that have to make sure that that's being done, and all those add to the cost of doing business. So,
Yeah, some of the ones that pop into my head, the Cherry Avenue exit, that I don't know how much for sure that additional project cost is in relation to really some unfunded environmental mandates that went along with that. I don't think anybody wants to destroy the environment, but a pretty significant chunk of ground had to be set aside for that, for environmental purposes. We have some other restrictions that we have to abide by up and down that corridor that'll potentially hinder its development because of that. One of the ones that really, there are two that stick in my craw just a little bit, and I'm not sure one of them was necessarily federal, so I'll maybe pick on the state, but we were awarded this a few years ago, I want to say a $500,000 grant on the basis of being able to go into areas of Kearney and put in new sidewalks that didn't have sidewalks. You know, great thing, and, you know, go into areas of your community where people otherwise probably really couldn't afford assessments or to put in their own sidewalks, so great thing, right? Well, except that the sidewalks themselves, as I recall, had to be at least 5 feet from the curb. They had to be at least X amount wide, I want to say at least 4 feet wide. They had to be able to, more handicap accessible, which is a great in theory, but now all of a sudden when you're dealing with older neighborhoods in Kearney, you have trees that are right in that way, and the only way we were going to be permitted to use the money was to take out some great mature existing trees. In some other areas of Kearney where the houses were relatively close to the curbs, you were going to end up with a sidewalk that was literally 5 feet away from the front of the house, which didn't look good or make much sense. So we ended up just giving all the money back. We just said, you know, this is an unworkable program, we can't use it, and gave up the grant funds. The other one, and this one was federal regs, it just really stuck in my craw. We were doing 39th and Avenue E, redoing that intersection there. We really had come across some last minute funding that allowed us to go in and very cost effectively with some federal dollars redo that intersection. We knew at the time that we wanted to put in a turning lane, in other words, a left-hand turn lane to help traffic move that intersection better. Unfortunately, for us to redesign that was going to put us through a whole other environmental assessment process and delay the project by 9 to 12 months to get that done, and then the funding would have been gone. So, you know, we ended up, it's a nice intersection, it's certainly better than what it was, but how cost effective was it to do it without doing it to the specs that we wanted to? That was certainly a problem. So I think we're probably up here so used to unfunded mandates, we forget about the ones that happened 5 years ago, and because we just got used to them. We just know they're there, and so it just kind of runs over your head, and you get frustrated about them, but it doesn't do any good. You still have to follow them.
Well, first of all, thank you again for providing this for us today. And in representing young professionals, I would like to know how you see that we are vital to Kearney. Obviously, we want to provide social and networking opportunities, but we also want to provide professional and personal development for young professionals. So we want to hear from you what you see we've done well, how we're vital, and maybe what you need from us, and so that we can go forward.
Well, from what I've seen, you're collectively energizing a lot of younger folks, and you're networking, and that's important. Everybody here knows that in business and industry, you have to network. And I think when I talk to the leadership Kearney group and professional network, it's get involved. And there's different ways that you can get involved. but there's a lot of different ideas. Jonathan, by putting all this stuff on the technology, we've done the same thing, only we've done it in different ways. And so the questions that were asked, I was sitting there the other night looking at it and said, well, here's how I think this is going to be answered, this is going to be answered. And essentially, we brought it on. But it's got everybody engaged. And generally, when you're sitting here, we talk about how many people are going to ask questions, probably 3 or 4. Or the other way, there have been a ton of questions if you just entering it. And so I think we have to be sensitive to the new and emerging social media, technology, and that's the things that kids are growing up with. When you got a little granddaughter that's 1 year old and already knows how to work away on a phone, that scared me when I was that. Wow, I tell people, bag phone's pretty cool. So, young professionals bring a lot to the table. But I also have, and I'll share this story, and he's not here so he can't dispute it, but I said, hey, I need you to show me how to do this. And he goes, well, if I show you, then I don't need you. And I said, yeah, you do, because I'm going to keep your butt out of trouble. Now you show me how to do that, and we'll reach an agreement here. And because I said, there's an awful lot that you don't know about relationships and how to get things done. So you just can't push one group out and bring another one in. You've got to be working together. And that's why I've always encouraged our young professionals to get involved, but yet don't go into the attitude that, well, we're the next generation, you guys move off to the side. Because that's how I was brought up. Respect and learn from those that are older than me and came before me, because they can teach you an awful lot. And I don't think that we should ever lose sight of that. And that would be my encouragement to the young professionals. Let's get engaged. Let's make sure that we're on the same team, going the same direction. Because you have a lot of things that maybe that we do too, that we're just not thinking about that.
I was young once, a long time ago. I know, I was his high school history teacher, and by the way, I'm the one with hair. But let's move on. Young people, when you have young kids, you can't help but be involved in things like youth sports. You look at things for what's best for the kids. You look out for that next generation. And there is a tremendous amount of energy with the young professional age group that we're looking at in terms of saying, looking at things in a new way. Why do you guys always do it this way? And as Stan says, sometimes there's a reason why we do it that way, and sometimes we do it that way because we never thought of the way that you just suggested. And your way is better than ours. I'll be honest with you, when the discussion first came up about building a skate park, I'm like, I don't know. I had the wrong image. I was absolutely flat out wrong about what that was going to look like, the clientele they were going to have, and how it was going to look in our community. I think it's been a wonderful thing. And I kicked myself because I didn't get on board with that a whole lot earlier. And now I'm one of those guys that says, let's find a way to light that baby. Let's get a couple more hours worth of use out of it for those kids, because it's been a wonderful thing. And some of those ideas for doing that came from younger people seeing things in a different way. I'm not teaching at the high school anymore, and I've kind of lost a little bit of that connection that I had with teenagers and kids that age group. So need to hear that source from somebody. And I think the Young Professionals Group is a wonderful opportunity to do that. I've always been deeply grateful with people that are working with their own kids and then bring problems and issues to us. And I think that's exactly what you guys need to do.
So my hair notwithstanding, my own kids made fun of how thick glare on my head. They're like 4 and 6, and already making fun. But when I was running for city council, I didn't know how that would go. So being younger than the other members, and I will say that I was pleasantly surprised in Kearney. It took all 30 seconds for someone to tell me, I'm so glad that we have young emerging leaders in Kearney. Thank you for running for city council. This is a city that is embracing that. I think that young leaders should not be afraid to step up, and Stan gave great advice for how to do it, and that is so important. The delivery and how you engage is really important. But there are plenty of opportunities. Be intentional about it. We're going to. One way I first got involved for young professionals in the room on the boards and commissions in the city. I was on the board of adjustment, which was mind-numbingly worrying to some people. I thought it was really, really fun to decide how many feet away from a curb a sign should be. So it worked out okay. But those are things that you can do as young professionals to get involved in the community, and I hope more will do that.
I mean that interesting is why he was a good student, by the way.
I think the Young Professional Network, when I look back at my career, when I started out, I sought to be a volunteer. And when you're volunteering, you don't expect to go in and be the leader right off the bat. And so I think that's really important, to go in there with the mind that you're going to be of service. And through those opportunities that I had, that led to other opportunities to be a leader at a later date. Because I showed that I was interested, that I showed that I had a passion for those activities. And that's what is important. If you, once you get involved and you show those interests and that you're passionate about it and you're willing to sacrifice and do some service, that's when people realize you're serious about it, and then there's the opportunity to bring you in now as to be a co-chair or to be a vice president to work you through the chairs and those kinds of things. So those opportunities are there for you, but you need to first seek to serve rather than to seek to lead.
Well, Stan didn't disclose it, but the conversation he had earlier with how do I use this technology and then I'll keep your butt out of trouble, that was really with Jonathan. So Stan does know how to use his phone now, but it's not a bag phone anymore. You know, and today is actually a pretty good example. In all honesty, when Jonathan, who is the driver behind today's event, first kind of floated that out there, I probably, I don't know if he saw this, but I probably rolled my eyes just a little bit saying, yeah, well, be lucky if we get 10 people there. And I think we've had a far better turnout today of people than I would have expected, because we've tried over the years to have events and just struggled to get the type of participation we would have liked. So my hat's off to Jonathan for being unjaded by history and coming up with some good ideas like that.
And for ignoring all your bad looks.
Yes, and for ignoring all my bad looks. That's exactly right. Although there are a few of them you shouldn't ignore. But, in terms of young professionals, I'll pull out 3 things that I think you guys could really be involved in and have a pretty positive impact on. One, we're getting ready for one of the biggest transitions that our community has ever seen, and that's by welcoming the new VA home here to Kearney. I think that is a great opportunity for people to get involved with a project that is of significance in scope and has so much potential to have a meaningful impact on so many people's lives. You know, one of the things that I've tried to do is listen to the complaints that have come out of Grand Island over the move of that facility. And it is a big move for that community. And, you know, some of their concern, I think, is rightly focused on what's the impact on the residents. And of course, we tend to undersell that maybe more than we should because we want that facility here. But the truth is, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be moving. And whether they were moving across town or moving 50 miles, it's going to be uncomfortable for them. It's going to be uncomfortable for them and for their families. And so anything you as a group can do to get involved in that project and bring some energy and some ideas to how we make that transition smooth, I think is going to be very valuable to our community. A couple other things I would throw out there are, you know, we're always trying to find ways to continually bridge gaps with UNK. We have a great source of professional strength in our community with UNK. We have a lot of solid business executives here. I'm not sure we always bridge the gap between our businesses and what's going on at UNK. Helping tell bosses that, hey, you could run internship programs here, be minimal cost, and here's what you'd get out of it. Some of those kinds of things I think you can do. And then finally, probably kind of dear to my heart, is youth sports. I mean, I'm out coaching 11, 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, and I'm sure they're fine with a short ball, pudgy old guy coaching soccer for them. It's better than their parent most of the time. But to the extent you've been involved in soccer, baseball, football, or even things like band, go be volunteers in the schools to help those things be more cherished times and lives for our youth and our community.
In light of the economic benefit that the Cranes and the Platte River brings to Kearney and the future of a possible whitewater park, what plans does the city have right now to include water conservation and water use guidelines into the comprehensive plan to help protect our water resources into the future?
Okay, it's kind of interesting when you talk about that, because in the comp plan we have some requirements to put conservation type measures in there. And I serve on the Natural Resources Commission. And for the last year, we have been trying to develop, or are in the process of developing, the rules and the guidelines for how we manage our water in the state of Nebraska. And there are 3 of us that represent municipal users. Myself, and then Joel Christensen from MED in Omaha, and then Assistant City Attorney for the Lincoln, City of Lincoln. And we are on there, there's like 20-some members on that commission, a lot of NRD folks, a lot of special interest groups. And our focus is, are we going to put rules in there that will help water sustainability within the state of Nebraska so that we don't end up like Texas and some of the other states that didn't have a water sustainability or water management plan in place. And so we're looking at all those rules. And part of those rules is funding is available. Now, how do you develop the applications? What is the purpose? But at the end of the day, it always comes down to our #1 focus is how do we protect our water resources in Nebraska with water sustainability. Now, the challenge you have is that 90 to 95%, probably closer to 95% of the water users in the state of Nebraska is ag-based. And so when we look, and I talked to Kirk about this the other day, our well fields are 1,000, 1,500 gallon per minute wells. Okay? So when we run that, we use on average of 3 million plus gallons in the winter, and upwards of 7 million plus during the summer. But when you look at an irrigation well, because I ran the numbers, this was 2 years ago, and I was sitting in there and we were talking about that very issue on who uses the water and how's it returned. Is it consumptive use? What happens to it? And I ran the numbers, and the numbers that I was running at that time, it took 10 farmers' irrigation wells to use as much water as the city of Kearney did. And how many irrigation wells are in Buffalo County? You know, you think about that. So we really have to have a water management program that's driven by the state, but we also have to make sure that the city municipal systems across the state, not just ours, are a part of that solution, and that we are looking at water sustainability, because municipal water concerns it's more than just preserving the plat. We also have to be sensitive to good drinking water, nitrates, all those types of things. So there's a lot that goes into water management in the state of Nebraska. But I can assure you that everything that we do as a city, that we're part of that in the comp plan. What do we do? We're doing UV on our water system. I don't know if that's how that's going to work, but we do treat. We put, I don't know what percentage is, maybe Kirk can tell us how much water that we take out, yet how much actually is discharged back into the river system. When we were looking at Facebook and that project, we were looking, they were going to use water cooling on a significant amount. And so we did the studies, and the chicken man, Darren, he was looking at all those numbers to see how that water flows back into the Wood River. So it's always something that we have to be paying attention to. Where's that water going once we've used it? Because it's not all consumptive use. But I will promise you that we will have some things in there. But as sustainability of the Platte River, it takes more than what we can do as a city of Kearney on the Platte River. But we know the value, we know what it means. And part of the Natural Resource Commission is made up of recreational water users, wildlife folks, so there are people that have all those interests. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's a big animal that needs to be approached.
No, I understand it's a big animal.
Yeah, and so we will.
Nice enough to see.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it. I don't know what that means city-wise, but I think we do a pretty good job. You know, we've had the Girl Scouts went around and they put the little things on the, don't dump in the storm sewer stuff. And so, yeah, I think we're doing pretty good compared to what I hear from other municipalities across the state. We're doing really well.
I think the Facebook proposal is a great example of how well it's been on our radar, that we're aware of it, because that was going to be zero water usage for what really was millions of gallons that they would be using every week, and it was going to recharge directly back into the groundwater, all the water that they had used. So, I mean, it was going to recharge the groundwater and really be zero usage. And that was one of the things that really Facebook was very appreciative of, but also very, exactly what we need to do. And I think it's very much on the radar.
And they also another thing that people don't think about, but as we're developing and growing our community is how much impervious surface are we eliminating with parking lots and those types of things. So what would normally be going back down in the groundwater with development and growth in the community is going down storm sewers or something like that. So we're conscientious of that. So when the city says here how much on this project you have to have pervious soil in your development, there's a reason for that. But people don't always understand what that reason is.
I don't really have a lot more to add on the city's portion, but when you look at agriculture across the state over the last 20 to 30 years, you've seen significant changes in how agriculture more effectively used water and been more conscientious about their use of water. They're metering wells across the state. Many of the NRDs are restricting water usage to very small amounts compared to the 18 inches of water per acre that used to be used. So there's significant work being done in the agricultural sector to try to be more conservative. Some of that's been dictated a little bit with the Republican River case with Kansas, but all of those things have come into effect over the last 20 to 30 years, and I'm sure they'll continue to find better ways to use water within the state from an ag sector standpoint.
I couldn't make anything less murky than what they already have, so we'll leave it at that.
I would say, in the interest of time, the world does have a show tonight, so we'll just take one more question so we can get people out of here on time.
Hi, I'm Patrick Moore with Wilkins Henrik Stover Architects. I wanted to say thanks to you guys for holding this forum. It's been a great opportunity to hear some concerns of the community and to find out what's going on. Today we're talking about the comprehensive plan. And I understand that currently the city of Kearney is without a city planner. Is that a role that we are looking to fill currently? And if so, what qualities are we looking for in a person to fill that position?
I would defer that to Mr. Morgan and our HR, Shauna. But we are going to be filling some of that position back to the level. I'm not sure what we're going to do. The qualities? Personally, I can't lay that out because I'm not familiar enough with that particular position to that level of detail. I don't think you guys would address it, but those are the types of things that we defer to the city manager and our HR people for the staffing issues. But I would tell you that you sent the information we've got, Matt, on your Patrick sent about a 4-page letter of different recommendations, different things you'd like to see. And there were some in there that I think some of them you didn't know that we tried, but there are certainly a few of those that I've got marked that I think we want to carry forward and take a look at too. So I want to thank you for that. But I don't know if that answers your question. Somebody else wants to address it, or as far as the city planner.
Well, again, Mr. Morgan will make that decision. That's kind of the structure of our government with the city manager form of government. We don't interfere with that. But one of the things that I think we've looked at with that department and overall with planning is solution-focused, customer service. We understand the importance of having somebody that's going to be able to do it right and try to make it so development can happen and prosper. I mean, we've talked so much about the need for housing. If we can find some ways to remove some of those barriers, I think that's the general direction that we're going to be going, and a perfect time to be looking at some of those solutions as we go. But again, our structure of government, the city manager makes those decisions, but I think that they know that customer service and solution focused is the direction we want to go. Those will be the key elements of that job.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this up here then. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate those of you who stayed throughout the program. And just a few notes to wrap up for you. Behind me on the screen, we have a website called Cultivate Kearney, which a number of you are aware of, where you can submit comments and questions about Kearney that relate to our strategic plan. So go there, visit to get more input. And a number of you asked, hey, where can I get this, the results of the polls so that I can learn more about the answers and see what the audience had to say. That's one thing I didn't even anticipate when I was putting this together, that people would want to see that data after the fact. So we'll get that together, and we'll put it on the Cultivate Kearney website to make that available. So we'll find a way to notify folks that that's out there. Additionally, as you can see there are additional town halls as related to the comprehensive plan. They won't be as in-depth as this one, but they're going to be in April. The dates are behind me. Also, our council information is on the website. You can call any of us anytime between the hours of, what do you want to say? But we're very available and accessible. I think everyone's cell phone or home phone is listed, and we respond to the email. So please get a hold of us. We don't want to be inaccessible. We want to answer questions. And another thing I would just encourage you to do, if you're interested in being a part of a board or commission, city board or commission, contact City Hall. They have forms that you can fill out to be considered when openings come available. And just as a reminder, Buffalo County Community Partners is continuing to videotape for their America's Best Community submission. And so they're looking for testimonials from you about why Kearney is one of America's best communities. And Holden, will you be set up in the lobby then? Is that right? You'll be set up? So right on your way out the door, if you want to give them a quick plug on their video, I know they'd really appreciate it. So with that, I think we're all wrapped up. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening.